Okay, so this is Diocles. Diocles, who after becoming emperor, changed his name to Diocletian. Diocletian, like almost all of the soldier emperors of the 3rd century, came from the Balkans. In this particular case from modern Croatia. And like almost all of the soldier emperors of this period, he comes from a peasant background. He joins the Roman army as a way to basically win money and perhaps win good fortune. He turns out to be, despite his lack of education, a very good administrator, a very good general in many ways. And this was really quite important because when he does come to power as emperor, he's experienced both sides of the system, civil system, military system. And he can see the problems that the Roman Empire faces on both sides. Inflation, military threats, the need for a better organized army, all this sort of thing. So what he does is he brings into effect a whole series of reforms which essentially end the 3rd century crisis. In bringing in these reforms, he establishes the Roman Empire on a completely new path in many ways. Up to now, I've been talking about the Principate, the system of administration and military matters, the economy as developed by the first princeps. The word princeps basically means first, but first amongst equals. What Diocletian does, though, is he completely reforms the Augustan system, military system, the financial system, the taxation system. He's a fascinating emperor, but that's not really what this course is about. But the most significant change in many ways is that his title changes. He's no longer princeps, he's dominus, lord. The Principate had been a system whereby you had a ruler who had absolute authority and power, but he disguised it. I'm just the first amongst equals. Dominus means lord. Diocletian makes it quite clear. I am the boss. This will be done, that will be done. So we sometimes think of the reforms associated with Diocletian as marking the end of the Principate. Some scholars would say it marks the beginning of the Dominate, Dominus, dominate, in which the emperor does dominate everything. Other people talk of this as the beginning of late antiquity, when the Roman Empire is not quite the same Roman Empire that we know under Augustus, but it's not medieval. So in that sense, of course, you can see Diocletian as being the granddad of Byzantine history. But Byzantium is not the capital yet, so you can't really stretch that point too far. But the thing is that the reforms that he introduces allowed the Roman Empire to continue until May the 29th, 1453 in Constantinople, and a little bit longer in Trebizond. And when the Osmanli take over what was the Eastern Roman Empire, they take over a lot of the systems of government that this guy introduces, which is why your ID cards give your registration as your grandparents' home area rather than where you were born, right? So my sons come from Erzincan. What? They're born in Istanbul, but they come from Erzincan? Oh, okay. That's Diocletian's reform. People are tied to the place where they are born. So there you go. But enough about Diocletian. How is it that he manages to put the Roman Empire onto a very firm footing? Well, the first thing is that he realizes, I mean, other emperors have known this, but he's the one who really realizes that you cannot fight a threat on the Danube without there being a risk of a threat to Syria. You cannot deal with Syria without there being a risk of a threat to the Danube. You need two rulers. So in 286, he appoints one of his colleagues, Maximian, as his Caesar or co-ruler, and we get what we call a diarchia, a form of government with two rulers. Diocletian now takes responsibility for the Eastern Roman Empire, which is where he sees the biggest threat. Maximian takes responsibility for the West. Aurelian has dealt with the Germans. They're not a problem so much now. 287, Maximian is made Augustus, and Diocletian takes the title Jupiter. Maximian takes the title Hercules. Well, this is a deliberate political ploy. It's meant to indicate their relative status. Diocletian, Jupiter, the head of the gods. Diocletian has got the top job. Hercules, son of Jupiter, has got the duty of carrying out these things. But they also are deliberately meant to put the emperor, the dominus, in a different position. They imply that the emperors, the two emperors, have been chosen by the gods. They're directed by the gods. They're helped by the gods. But Diocletian soon realizes that even with two emperors, you've still got a bit of a problem. There's rather a lot of Roman Empire. He's got no children of his own. Maximian does, he doesn't. So in 293 he decides to subdivide the Roman Empire one more time. He appoints an officer named Galerius as his Caesar and tells Maximian to appoint Constantius Chlorus as his Caesar. So we get the tetrarchy, the rule of four. Nicomedia, Cogeli as it now is, becomes the main eastern capital for Diocletian. Galerius is normally at Sirmium, not far from modern Belgrade, but often at Antakya. Milan becomes the main western capital, not Rome. Rome is too far away from the threat. Milan in the north. Well, they've got this wonderful airport today called Malpensa. Would you like to land at an airport called Bad Thoughts? That's what Malpensa means. Ooh, bad idea. It is a bad idea. Anyway, Milan is much nearer the threat. Constantius Chlorus established himself at Trier. So the Roman Empire is now divided like this. This is Diocletian's part, the Greek-speaking East. We don't know how well Diocletian spoke Latin. He must have spoken some Latin. This is Galerius's part here, capital Sirmium, capital Nicomedia. There's Maximian over here, Milan, closer to deal with any threats, and over here, the Constantius Chlorus with Trier. To emphasize that this is a joint project, that everybody has a specific responsibility within this system of government, Diocletian also organizes a change in portraiture on coins and in statues. What we see happening is a single image. It indicates that all four emperors are working together towards the same goal. So you get this rather block-like image in many ways. But Diocletian's clever enough to realize that he needs to indicate each one of these four rulers has a personal connection to an area. So when you look at the portrait of Diocletian, you can see that he is different from Galerius. The portrait of Maximian is different from Constantius Chlorus. There's differences in the beards, like that. So Diocletian's coinage, I mean, at first sight, it all looks very much the same. It's very boring. It is boring coinage, but there again. Some people like this particular period. But there is a difference between each of them. I could have chosen four coins that are much closer. I could have chosen ones which are much more different. For example, he's got more of a hook nose on one. He's got more of a broken nose on another coin. So the coinage gives you that image of four rulers working to get together. It's a political statement. But each ruler is personally responsible for one part of the Roman Empire. The story is very different when we come to statues, imperial portraiture. When we look at the imperial portraiture, what we find is they are more or less identical every single time. There's no real difference when we get them in groups. Individual portraits, there aren't very many that survive, are slightly different, and we'll see that in a moment. Well, this, of course, is the most famous of the portraits of the Tetrarchs, the one that's built into the corner of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. St. Mark's Basilica is a copy of Constantine's church in Constantinople, in the Fatih area where the Fatih Mosque is now. We know, it was long thought that this must have been taken from Constantinople after the Venetians captured Constantinople in 1204. After the Venetians did it then. We know that this part of St. Mark's Basilica was built in 1231, so that's to give us the date. Now, look. He's missing a bit of a foot, and they had to put that in. That's the missing bit. That was found during building work near Bodrum Cami in Istanbul in the 1960s. So we know that has to come from Constantinople. Exactly what these two statues did is not certain. They probably come from a column. They are made of imperial purple porphyry. The finest imperial marble, the best imperial marble, well, it's granite really, it's the hardest stone to actually work in many ways. When we look at the portraits, the only difference is that the two men on the left, with their arm extended protectively over the person on their left, these have got beards, so we can assume that that's Diocletian or Maximian, and that's Maximian or Diocletian. These must be Constantius Chlorus and Galerius there. Originally, of course, there would have been jewels set into their costumes, something stuck in there and things like that to make them look absolutely really fantastic. There aren't that many other surviving complete statues of the Tetrarchs, but we do have this couple which are now in the Vatican, which were found built into a church in Rome. Again, they're made of porphyry. I couldn't actually find a colour illustration of them, unfortunately. Again, you can see they're virtually identical. Except these two guys have got their mouths a bit turned down like that. I had a hard day at the office today. And these two guys are, it's all right, it's okay, we can keep on going, we can deal with the problem, don't worry about it. So we can identify these two as being the two senior emperors and these two as being the junior Caesars. But otherwise, well, this is the Tetrarch, made of porphyry, but which one? Probably Galerius, as this one was found in Cairo. Here's another Tetrarch. Or which one? Probably Galerius again, because this was found at Romulana Felix, now in modern Serbia, but not far from his birthplace. But, you know, sort of short, fat, round face there compared to that one. They don't look identical. Could that be Diocletian being found in Cairo? It's possible, but Diocletian is older than Galerius, so it's much more likely to be Galerius. The Tetrarchy only lasts while these guys are alive, so it's got to belong to that period there. This on the left shows you the lower part of two of the Venice statues. You can see they've got identical swords, identical clothing, identical belts like that. This is a statue made of limestone or a white marble, which was found at the Golden Gate in Constantinople, Istanbul. We're missing the rest of it, but you can see that this, okay, the sword is the other way round, the sheath is slightly different, but it's basically the same as the Venice one. I mean, this is mass-produced art to promote a political ideology, a political statement. Well, Diocletian has to go to Rome after becoming emperor, and he arrives at Rome and he decides to do what all good Roman emperors do, which is to build a bathhouse, which is up here. It's 5 minutes walk from the modern railway station, which is just over thereabouts. So it's easy to get to. It's basically a version of the Caracalla bathhouse. It's a bit bigger in many ways. It's got this circular part here, so there's more like Trajan's baths in that sense. This is probably a theatre. It's got the standard imperial bathhouse plan: caldarium, tepidarium, frigidarium, open air swimming pool, exercise areas. The great thing about this is that in the 16th century, Michelangelo was given the job of building a church inside it, Santa Maria degli Angeli. And so you can see most of Diocletian's bathhouse today. This is the Piazza della Repubblica. That's where the basic exedra for the theatre was. You can see the general outline going like that. Here's the bathhouse, there's the frigidarium, there's the tepidarium. The caldarium is almost completely gone. The swimming pools have been built over. You can see where the palestra were, the exercise areas were on either side. So I mean, compare the Google image with what you've got there, and you can see what I mean. The main railway station is just over here, and there's a bit of the Servian Wall going through there, so you've got a nice little series of connections, and there's a lovely little series of cafes, of course, just outside there. Well, this is the remains of the caldarium. So we've just got the circular part there. Behind there, you've got the tepidarium. Here, very small, and then you have got the frigidarium. Well, that is an original Roman ceiling. And so you can get some idea of the height, the columns on the side, the 4 main columns at the central part. 3 of them are original, one is a replacement. They're made of Egyptian granite. This is the original Roman cross vault. In the bathhouse, covered with mosaic, of course, and covered with paintings, so we don't have that anymore. Diocletian then develops Nicomedia as his capital. And you would have to look very hard around Khojaly to try and find anything of this around Izmit, and you won't find anything at all. There has to be a theatre there, no idea where it is. A circus, no idea where it is. There has to be bathhouses, no idea where it is. An imperial palace, no idea where it is. We know there's a church there that was bigger than the imperial palace, because Diocletian had it destroyed. No idea where it is. You cannot see anything in Nicomedia of Diocletian's capital. Thessalonica is developed as a sort of summer capital for Galerius, and we can see some bits of the architecture that belonged to the palace of Galerius, including the so-called octagonal room, which is an important building in Roman architecture because octagonal on the outside, but you can see it's got all these beautiful sort of recesses going around it. It's rather like the Pantheon in that sense. The Pantheon, of course, is circular. As you can see, brick and concrete architecture. Whoops, went the wrong way there. Close to the palace, Galerius builds a mausoleum, brick built, converted into a mosque. So Ataturk would have known this when he was growing up. It then becomes the church of Georgios, St. George. You can just see the remains of the minaret from when it was converted into a mosque there. Beautiful brick-built building, marvellous structure in many ways. We're going into a period where the emperors want to make their mark, and they make their mark by building these big mausoleum. So we know the palace is over here, we know the mausoleum is over there. Colonnaded streets connecting the mausoleum to the palace. This is the main road going through Thessalonica, which is colonnaded on all sides, and it goes through a tetrapylon, a 4-way arch, which survives in part, not terribly well. But we've got one side of it And this is built by Galerius to commemorate his battles against the Sasanian Persians. He didn't do very well, actually. Diocletian had to keep on coming out to help him. Unfortunately, a lot of the sculpture has gone, but in places it does survive reasonably well. You can see it's still this frontal aspect. But look at it. I mean, this is distinctly 4th century going into Byzantine sculpture. There's nothing classical about it. It's just rounded figures, not terribly impressive to look at in many ways, not terribly well made. You can reconstruct the story of some of the battles. I mean, obviously here we've got Galerius standing on the back of a defeated enemy, ready to get on a horse. Various battle scenes. They're pretty stereotyped. And you can see the ultimate inspiration, a sarcophagus front. I mean, that's a battle sarcophagus. Scenes like this. Emphasis on frontality, though, which is really quite important. We can't identify the scene any more than saying it's a sacrifice scene, though. Trier, we have this enormous building, brick built, basilica, an audience hall, built at the time of Constantius Chlorus. We're missing 2 courts on either side of it. You can see how big it is from the car. Originally, with galleries going around on the side like this, this reconstruction drawing, based on the archaeological evidence, shows you what the exterior would have looked like. Converted into a church at some unknown date. It survived complete, including its original roof, until 1944, when it was bombed, when Trier was bombed during the attack on Germany. But, you know, looking down it like this now, we don't have any of the original decoration, of course, but simply a massive building, very beautiful building. In Rome itself, the only other thing we have from this time was in the year 303, Diocletian orders the construction of 5 columns in the Roman Forum, 2 with the 2 emperors on, 2 with the Caesars on, the 5th one with Jupiter on. Well, there's the Arch of Titus, Severan Arch, so you know where you are right now. We've got a representation of those columns on the Arch of Constantine, which I'll talk about next week. You've got this scene showing Constantine here, and you can just see in the background those 5 columns built to celebrate the Decinalia, the 10 years that Diocletian had been emperor. And of course these are the Hadrianic Tondi, so you know where you are with that. The bases of the columns are still there. They've been rather smashed about. They've got these victory figures on one side. So this one is dedicated to one of the Caesars, so sort of happy 10th anniversary. But look at the carving of that victory figure. Well, the idea of the victory figure, of course, writing on a shield, goes back to Trajan's column of Marcus Aurelius. But look at the difference in the quality between that and that. We're getting into short, stubby people at all. When 305, Diocletian said, "That's it, I've done my bit, I'm going to retire." And he built a little palace for himself at Spalato in modern, is it Croatia? Is it Serbia now? I can't remember which now. Used to be Yugoslavia. A palace that's built very much like a fortress. Remember Diocletian the General. Reconstruction view there. And as you can see, an awful lot of it still survives. And we can still see it's divided into 4 distinct parts. That's the imperial part. These are servants' quarters and guards' quarters. So we were looking at servants' quarters, guards' quarters there, and the imperial part here. So well preserved because it becomes a fortified village in the medieval period. Marvellous late Roman military architecture. We were just looking at the gate there with these projecting octagonal towers. This wonderful thing that's called the peristyle or arcade, which is this leading up to the imperial, sorry, I'm looking at that part there, leading up to this entrance to the imperial quarters, mausoleum there, and a temple to Jupiter on the other side. Remember, Diocletian identifies with Jupiter. This is a proper arcade. This is what we see in Christian architecture. Columns go up, the arch starts above the capital. So this is in one sense, the origins of some of the later Christian architecture. Porphyry columns marking the entrance here, lovely Syrian arch. So I thought I'd put up a romantic view of it at night. Over here, the mausoleum, which he builds for himself. And there we have it, and an octagonal one. And I do feel a bit sorry for poor old Diocletian in a way, because Diocletian starts an official persecution of the Christians. And what happens after he dies? His mausoleum becomes part of a Christian church. Oh, poor Diocletian. Anyway, I'm going to stop there because you've got to do... Yeah.